Did you all enjoy your extra hour of sleep with it Saturday?
Actually, kind of made me grumpy.
It made you grumpy. Well, that's not what I was
Didn't
expecting.
the day go on so long? I felt like noon was like 3 o'clock.
Oh,
That's terrible.
I was driving back at 5:30 and it literally felt like it was like 9 o'clock. It was
Yeah.
so weird.
yeah.
My fault was still long. And I was walking at like 6 p.m. last night, I was already dark.
Well, I'm glad to say that we are all here today. I don't know how often that happens, but way to go. Give yourself a pat on the back. I have nothing to return to you except maybe just a leftover stray piece of homework here and there. Because I must not have collected anything last class. But I will be collecting something today, and that's going to be your worksheet, which I call Part Writing Homework Handout A. And that is dealing with part writing two chords whose roots are a perfect fourth or perfect fifth apart. Last week we talked about how the part writing is the same for both root relationships. And we also talked about 3 guidelines, again, suggestions to help you avoid committing or writing any part writing errors. And I tried to make a distinction at the end of last week that going against these rules right here on this yellow sheet, these are the errors. And not following the suggestion of the guideline is not necessarily an error. Just not following the suggestion of the guideline will probably likely lead to errors that are found on this. In fact, yours wasn't exactly yellow. I think it was technically golden or something. But so that you can find that and keep that list of 15 rules, part writing rules, organized with the rest of your materials. So, let's go ahead and take a look at that handout that you have for today. So the top 3, you had to find an error in each of those 3 on the left. You're supposed to at least describe or tell me a little bit about what was going wrong, the error, and then you were supposed to part write those correctly over on the right side. And then at the bottom, you were supposed to use guidelines 1, 2, or 3 for moving between each chord successively. Any one of those guidelines would be fine. I do prefer you use guidelines numbers 1 and 2 most frequently because those I feel are the smoothest. But there was one instance in the bottom section where you did have to use guideline number 3. And it probably wouldn't hurt to, since I have them on the board, it probably wouldn't hurt to review those guidelines maybe right now, and then we'll take a look at the questions that you might have on the homework handout. Okay. So, all of these 3 measures I have up here have their root position chords where the roots are actually a perfect fourth apart. And last week, I guess it must have been Friday, we talked about how one of the guidelines said, as long as you find a tone, the one tone that's in common between the 2 chords, and you keep that tone static or stationary, then you can move the remaining 2 upper voices by step in the same direction, and you should have no part writing errors. So in all 3 of these measures, these are in F major. I'm going from an F major chord to a B flat major chord, or a 1 chord to a 4 chord. What is the common tone, the one tone that's shared between an F major and a B flat major chord? F, that's right. Okay. So the bass is already taken care of for us. I see that there's an F, which is the common tone. It happens to be in the alto voice in this measure. So I'm just going to leave it a stationary or static. I'm not going to move it at all. I'm going to slide it over. And then the rest of guideline 1 says the remaining 2 voices I have, I can move by step in the same direction. Well, it looks like I'm trying to spell, and again, it's always helpful to take stock of what notes you need and the note that you need to be doubled. So I'm trying to spell a B flat, a D, and an F chord in all of these measures here. And I asked you to double the root in all cases. So that means I'm going to need 2 B flats, if you want to do it like this, 2 B flats, 1 D, and one F. I have a B flat and I have an F. What's left? I need one D and I need another B flat. Can you see which direction I'll need to move my two remaining voices by step to fill out the chord? Which direction will I move them? Up or down?
Up.
That's right, up. So if I move the tenor up by step, I get my D. And if I move the soprano up by step, I get my B flat. And I should not have any part rating errors there. And I've got the right doubling I need and all the notes I need. So that was guideline 1. Keep the common tone stationary or static. Move the remaining two notes stepwise in the same direction. Guideline number 2 said, take the 3 top or 3 upper voices, soprano, alto, tenor, move them all in the same direction. You will not need to have any of those voices leap larger than a third. Okay. So I'm going to try to get my notes that I need in my B flat chord over here by moving all of these top 3 voices in the same direction with no leap larger than a third. Can anyone see or envision, kind of imagine, which direction do I need to move these top 3 voices? Do I move them down or up? To get B flats, Ds, and Fs with no leap larger than a third. Well, it turns out I'm going to have to move all 3 of the upper voices down. Down. You see, if I move this one down, it doesn't have to leap at all. If I move this one down, it'll leap a third. And then if I move this one down, it'll also leap a third. And that's what guideline number 2 says. Notice I have 2 B flats again, 1 D, and 1 F. Yes?
So just as like a clarification, because I wanted my homework and now I'm thinking it's right, but just to clarify. Number 2, the guideline 2, when you say the voices move together up and down, it doesn't matter if they're both at different intervals as long as they both move the same way?
Correct. All they have to be doing is moving in similar motion, not parallel motion.
That makes sense.
So for instance, in this case, one happened to move down by a step, another couple moved down by a third. That's okay as long as they're all moving the same direction.
Okay.
Yep, good. Guideline number 3, the least smooth of all the guidelines, but still is allowed, still is permissible and legal. Guideline number 3 says, find the common tone between the 2 chords and keep it static or stationary, just like I did in guideline number 1. So I'm going to take my F, which happens to be in the alto, and just slide it over. Then it says the note that is the third of this chord will leap to provide or produce the note, the third of this chord. So if I look at this triad and I see that it's FAC, I know that A is the third of this chord. So A is going, it happens to be in soprano, it's going to leap to become the third of my B flat major chord. And the third of a B flat major chord is D. So the A is going to leap to a D, and the remaining voice moves by step. Well, if I've got a B flat, an F, and a D, all I need is one more B flat because I double the root. So I'll take the tenor down by step, and there we go. Voila, that is guideline number 3. And all these guidelines should prevent you and help you avoid dealing with or creating part rating errors, which we don't want. So there's a quick review, quick rundown of what we talked about last class. Now let's take a look specifically at the homework handout. Do you have any questions about either the error detection at the top or the part rating at the bottom? Excuse me. What did I ask? I have an old copy. Did I ask you to at least mark or circle the error, or did I? Okay. And then you can use that space in between to describe it. And then hopefully you wrote the errors correctly over on the right side. I found, well, it doesn't matter. You can use any of these guidelines that you want to part write it correctly on the right side of your handout. Did you come up with a guideline to indicate down at the bottom for all of your chord or note motion from one chord to the next? Are you guys just that good? You probably are. Could be. No questions? All right then. Can you make sure your name is on it and I'll pick it up? Try to get it back to you next one.
I need to put your company.
All right, I'll come back.
I left mine on my desk in my room, I'll send you a picture of it when I get back.
Okay. Are you ready? Just gonna come. Okay. Okay. Well, last class, it's kind of a lot of information to take in regarding part writing chords whose roots are a perfect fourth or a perfect fifth apart. We're going to do just a little bit more of that as review, and then what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to part write correctly two chords whose roots are a third or a sixth apart. And that happens to be a lot less information. It happens to be pretty easy, pretty straightforward, okay? So can we start then today by, do you remember, oh, it was on the back of your goldenrod sheet, I think it was. You want to pull that out and turn to the back side. And we got to part write the three examples that we found errors to last week. We got to part write those correctly. Okay, so let's start by part writing the first one that we had in the top right. Part writing that one correctly over here, down on the bottom left. I think there's some space for you there. For those of you that were here on Friday, what did we say, what number error did we find for that first one in the top right? Number 3, right? There was a doubling error. In fact, the doubling error was in the second chord. It was in that 5 chord. You see that the C of that chord is not duplicated, but rather another note is. So, let's see here. I'm going to write in the first chord, which is voiced like this. Bass has an F, tenor has an A, alto has a C, and soprano has an F. And we're going to go to the 5 chord. But we're going to do it correctly this time. Notice that the roots are a fourth apart. So I can use any one of the 3 guidelines to get from this chord and move the notes smoothly to this chord. I prefer to use guideline 1 or 2 if we can. I think both would work. Which one do you want to use? Do you want to use uno or dos? Dos. Okay, we're going to use guideline number 2 then. It's been decided. Guideline 2 says take the top 3 voices and move them all in the same direction with no leap larger than a third. No leap larger than a third. And it looks like in this chord we need 2 C's, we need an E, and we need a G. Right? Because we're spelling a C-E-G chord for that 5 triad in this key. All right, here comes the $64,000 question. Should I move the top 3 voices up, or should I move them down to get these notes with no leap larger than a third?
Up.
Okay, I have a vote for down, I have a vote for up. If I tried to go down, I could move the tenor down by step, I could move the top voice down by a step, but then where would I move this one down to? You see how I would need another C, and I wouldn't want to move this one at all. So that one's not going to work. In fact, this would be using guideline number 1. Okay, but if you want to use guideline number 2, we're going to have to go up. So the nearest chord tone above this tenor's A that fits into this chord here is a C. The nearest chord tone above this C that fits in the chord we're going to is E, and the nearest chord tone above the F that fits into the chord is a G. And that is guideline number 2. Notice I do have my root doubled as I should. There's one E and there's one G. Could I have used guideline number 1? Absolutely. Yeah. No problem. Whichever one you prefer. Let me know if you have questions about this, if you're still not understanding something. But now is the time to get this under your belt. You have a question?
Can you show us guideline 1 as well?
You bet. I'll just erase the top 3 voices and quickly do that if you don't mind. Guideline 1 says to find the tone that's in common between the 2 chords and keep it stationary or static. The tone that's in common between an F triad and a C major triad is C. So I'm going to find that wherever it is, and I'm going to keep it static. Finally, the rest of that guideline says move, I don't want to say remove, why do I say that? Move the remaining 2 voices by step in the same direction. And in this case, we can go down. So you get just a slightly different voicing of the 5 chord, but you still get all the notes you need with the proper bill.
Can you play the 2 options or on the piano? Or
The 2 possibilities? Yeah, sure. So we're in F major. What I had originally up on the board with guideline number 2 would have sounded like this. But what I have up there with guideline number 1 sounds like this. Both are correct. The next one turns out was in G minor. Look at the key signature again. And the 2 chords were 5 going to 1. And the first chord was voiced like this, looks like D, A, D, F sharp. Why do I need an accidental on the F? Yeah, it's a 5 chord, good. It's in a minor key, and that is T, scale degree 7th, which needs to be raised always in a minor key. And what was the error related to T that we found up on the top there? What number was that? Yeah, that was error number 6, right? The leading tone was not resolved correctly. So let's do that. Maybe we should do that right away. Let me get the bass note in here. Where does that F sharp have to go? Up to what note?
The G.
G, that's right. Goes up a half step. Now, let's see which guideline that this is actually a part of. Okay? If I were to use guideline 2 here, that means this would have to go up and this would have to go up with no leap larger than a third. And I don't see that that's going to work. So I don't think guideline 2 is going to work here just because I have to take this F sharp to a D. But which guideline will work? That's right, number 1. The common tone between these 2 chords is D. Why does it always occur in the alto? I don't know why. It just happens to do that. I should make some examples that are a little more different. So keep that the same, no stationary or static, don't move it. Then the other 2 voices, namely the tenor and the soprano, will move by step in the same direction. So because this one went up, this one's going to go up by step as well. And voila, we have everything you need. Right? Doubling the right notes and everything.
What would be the error if you had the tenor as the D?
What would be the error if the tenor was the D? So in other words, there was a tenor down here, and the alto was on the A?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Mm.
I don't know that there would be any error. It would still work. So for instance, if it was revoiced like this, I would still keep the common tone stationary or static and move the remaining two voices by step in the same direction. It would just be voiced a little differently, but there are no errors there.
Could you have that ending 1 instead of with the original first 5? Like moving the alto down instead of keeping it at the same tone? When it was
Okay, so like in this voicing, you're saying for the alto go down.
No, in the original voicing, the first,
Okay, and then you're asking what, for the alto go down?
yeah, why couldn't it, or?
Okay, let me go back to the original voicing. Let's just see. I think it was like this. And so, yeah, he wanted the alto to go down
Alto down to the,
to the B.
yeah, and then the D would be in the tenor voice.
You take this down to a D.
Yeah,
Yeah, this would be wrong because we have parallel perfect fifths.
okay.
Definitely wrong. Yep. No can do, unfortunately. That's why we stick to these guidelines. I think that was what we ended up with. Okay. Then finally, the third one was in D major. Let's see here. And we started with a 2 chord going to a 5 chord. And the 2 chord was voiced like this, E, G, E, B. And what was the error we found up on the top half of the page for this one? Anybody? Parallel fifths, right? That was error number 1. There were parallel fifths between the bass and the soprano. The bass and the soprano. So we got to part write this correctly so we don't have those parallel fifths. Well, let's use again guideline 1 or 2. That's going to correct the error. I don't mind which one you want to do. Do you want to pick one again? 1 or 2? 2. What's that? You saying 1? How many? How many vote for guideline 1? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many vote for guideline 2? Ooh, hardly anybody. Okay, we're going to do guideline 1 then. How many care? No, I'm just I'm just kidding. Guideline 1, did I say, right? Okay, find the common tone between the 2 chords and keep it static. Boy, that turned out to be an alto again, right? Isn't there an E that belongs to this chord and this chord?
Yeah.
So slide it over, don't move it to another pitch. What did I say, guideline 1? Then the remaining voices move by step in the same direction. So which direction are the alto, are the tenor and the soprano going to go to fill out the A, C sharp, E?
Up.
Up, that's right. Okay, so this going up by step, and this going up by step. And voila, we have it fixed. We do not have any parallel fifths like we had before.
Can you do it in option 2 as well?
You bet. Option 2 says move all 3 upper voices in the same direction with no leap larger than a third. Well, so now the question becomes, do I take my upper 3 voices up or do I take them all down? In this case, I'm going to take them all down. The tenor is going to go from G down to E. That's only a small leap of a third. The E is going to go down to C sharp, so that's only the leap of a third. And the top voice is going to go down by a step, it turns out. And that would be perfectly acceptable as well. Well, I feel like we've been doing a lot of review, a lot of hard drilling here. So I hope that you, again, I don't ask you to memorize these guidelines, but I want you to get into the habit, I want these guidelines to influence your part writing. So that if you're taking like a tenor voice or something and you're leaping it an octave, or you're having it leap a fifth, that alerts you and says, hey, I'm doing something wrong. I don't have to move the voices this far. There's got to be a smoother, closer way to do it. Okay? Oh, okay. Thanks. All right, so with that done, I think we've taken care of the back side of your goldenrod sheet. And I've already collected the homework there, and we've done a little bit of a review. So I think it's time to go into talking about how to part write two chords whose roots are a third or a sixth apart now. And the part writing guideline is the same for both. Whether the roots are a third or a sixth apart, it doesn't matter. Most often we're going to find that the roots will be a third apart rather than a sixth apart, because the leap or the movement of one note a third away is a lot closer and easier to sing than it is to move from a note to a note that's a sixth away. Okay. But the part writing is the same regardless. Make some space here. By the way, if you like to have a place to refer to in your book, in chapter 6, it should be around page, looks like 86. That's the reference page for what I'm going to talk to you about today. And it is all found on page 86. And the nice thing about this type of root movement is that there's only one guideline. That's it, just one. And it's pretty easy to remember too. First of all, I need to start you with this. Okay, last class I said if two chords have their roots a fourth or a fifth apart, how many tones will they have in common? If two root position chords have their roots a perfect fourth or fifth apart, this was last Friday, how many tones are there going to be shared between them? Just one. Just one. But when you have two chords whose roots are a third or a sixth apart, there will always be two common tones between the chords. Two common tones. Or two tones that are shared between the two chords. So for instance, yes, I am going to go in the F major. Hold on. So for instance, if I start with this chord, a one chord voice as follows, F, A, F, C, and I want to take it to a sixth chord in F major. Who can tell me the root of a sixth chord in F major? Not B as in boy.
E.
Not E.
D.
Oh, D, sorry.
You're good.
You're right, D is in dog, yeah. Okay, so there it is. Yeah, because scale degree 6 in F is D. So the root of a sixth chord will be D. Notice now the roots are a third apart, not a fourth apart. Do you have a question?
Sorry, this is just for note writing.
Yep.
You said if it's a fourth or a fifth apart, it'll be one.
There'll always be one tone shared between
And
the two.
then what are we doing right now?
Okay, roots a third or a sixth apart,
Okay.
they'll always have two tones shared.
Okay.
Yeah, so so the roots are a third or sixth apart. Part writing is the same for both. The guideline is the same for both. Okay, so we know that the one chord in F major is FAC, and hopefully we know or we can figure out that a sixth chord in F major includes the pitches D, F, and A. Now, you tell me, what are the two tones that are shared, two pitches that are shared between these two chords?
F and A.
The F and the A, yeah. Okay? And the only guideline for this type of root relationship part writing is to find the two common tones and keep them static or stationary. Just slide them across. Don't move them to other pitches. So I gotta find an F and an A. Here's an F. Just slide it over. You don't have to move it up or down. It remains static. Here's the other common tone, happens to be in the tenor voice. Slide it over. Don't move it up or down. Keep it on the same pitch. So after you find the two common tones and keep them static, the remaining voice left, it moves by step. And that's it. And you're done. So let's just, again, don't lose the context here. What do I need two of in this chord? The D, the F, or the A? The D, right? So can I move the remaining voice by step to get a D? There you are, you're done. That's the only guideline for part writing two chords whose roots are a third or sixth apart. And if you do this every time, you'll avoid all those bad errors on your goldenrod sheet. You won't commit those, you won't accidentally write those. Play this just so you can hear how it sounds. Again, the motion is very smooth because there's hardly any motion at all. So the first chord is F major, going to D minor. And for those of you that are in a choir, whether it's women's choir, a concert choir, or chamber choir, you know that if you're an alto, it's really easy to, once you have your pitch F, it's really easy to sing it and sing it again, right? I mean, it's not hard. Tenors, same thing. If you're starting on an A and you have your pitch, you have no problem getting there. And then sopranos, that's no problem either for you. You just have to move up a step with your voice. These are very singable, very smooth motions to go from one chord to the next, and that's the whole point about learning the art of part writing. Okay? So, the guideline, if you want to summarize it, you could say keep the two common tones, move the remaining notes stepwise, if that helps you remember it or jogs your memory. Two common tones and stepwise, that should work every time. Every time. Let's try another one using some different chords. Stay in F major, and I'll start with the same tonic chord. I guess voiced the same way, F A and F C. But this time, let's go to a 3 chord in F major rather than a 6 chord. What's the root of a 3 chord in F? It's A, that's right. Should I go to this A or this A? It actually doesn't matter, because the part writing will be the same. Probably this A would be smoother for the basses to be able to sing. Just do, mi, you know, that's all they'd have to do, instead of going do, mi. They could still do it, right? They're very egotistical and self-centered. All right, so what is the guideline? Keep the two common tones and move the remaining voice stepwise. Well, what are the two common tones between an FAC and an ACE? Go ahead. A and C. Right? Those are the two common tones. If you want to write it out, please do so. It doesn't hurt. That's okay. FAC, this is going to be an ACE triad. You see how the two common tones are going to be C and A? So, let's find a C and an A in the upper voices and just slide them across. Keep them static. Well, I see an A here. And the tenor and the bass share. They learned to do that when they were in the kindergarten. Yeah, no, they have no problem sharing the same pitch. Okay. So I slide this common tone over. The other common tone is a C. Just slide it over, don't move it up or down, keep the same pitch. And then the remaining voice moves by step. Which tone am I missing in my ACE chord?
E.
The E.
So you have to move down.
Yeah, so you just move it by step to get it. That's it.
Would that be open or closed?
Let's see, it looks like this chord is starting with open structure, and it looks like the last chord happens to be in open structure as well. Over here, I had open, and I ended up with open. I have a feeling that whatever you start with, that the same structure is going to be perpetuated in the second chord. I haven't really tested that out or checked that out. But as long as you're following the only guideline, keeping the two common tones static and moving the remaining voice by step, You're good, you're golden on them, you wouldn't have any errors. So let me play that measure now, F major triad going to A minor triad. Okay, yes, Chris?
Will the base ever be changing, or will ever base be static for these?
I don't think so for now. If the base remains static, let's just do this in F major. If the base remains static, the guideline is that you are allowed to arpeggiate the three upper voices, you're allowed to move them freely to other chord tones. So in other words, if you didn't want all these upper voices to remain static also, if you wanted to change the sound of the one chord, you can move these freely to other chord tones in the FAC chord. Like for instance, you could move this down, the tenor down to an F, and you could move this down to an A, and you could actually even move this one down to a C. And I know it's a little bit larger leap, but they say that you're allowed to freely arpeggiate between the notes of your chord if the bass remains stationary. If you're hitting the same chord twice. Yes.
Wouldn't that be oh wait, never mind, just kidding. I was about to say, I thought it'd be parallel with this, but I can't see.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I mean, you could even go the other way. You could go up, so for instance, the soprano could go here, this one could go here, and this one could go here, and that would be fine as well. Because I still have proper spacing and good doubling. So yeah, if you're part writing from one chord to the same chord and you just want to change the voicing, feel free to arpeggiate freely, as long as you keep the proper doubling and good spacing, things like that. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so what we need to do now is, did that. Okay, let's do a few more of these examples, and then I'm going to just put some new ones on the board, and maybe you can part write these on your own staff paper, and we'll see how you did. You can check your answers. Okay, D flat. I'm going to go change keys a second. Here I have two chords whose roots are a third apart in the key of B flat. Whoops, hang on a second, I have the wrong Roman numeral. That looks a little better. Now, I want you to help me find a part writing error in here that I have created. And the reason I've got a part writing error is because I did not adhere to the guideline. I did not keep the two tones in common between the two chords static. Instead, I ended up moving everything when I shouldn't have, as far as the upper voices. Who can find an example of a part writing error? Maybe I'll play this on the piano so you can hear how not so independent it sounds. So I'm telling you there's at least one part writing. In fact, I think there's more than one. Help me identify the error. Yes?
Was there a parallel fifth between the soprano and tenor?
There is a parallel fifth between the soprano and the tenor, or you could say the soprano and the bass as well, yes. You see how D to A is a fifth, and then F to C is a fifth? Yep, you bet. So that's definitely wrong.
The bass and the tenor are parallel octaves.
Yeah, the bass and the tenor are in parallel octaves. That's why both of these make parallel fifths with the soprano, because they're in octaves with each other. So yeah, if you wanted to mark or note any of these errors, what you could do is you could just, like, say, you saw the parallel fifths, you could do that, and you could just write the error as parallel fifths. Or if you wanted to note the octaves, that would be fine. It's all bad, it's all wrong. Mhm.
Can I fix it?
Yes, you can. Can I go ahead and erase the notes so you
Yes.
can? Okay, let me get this out of here. Okay, two chords whose roots are a third apart. What should you do?
You need to keep the F and the A in the soprano and alto static.
Okay, because the F and the A are common tones. This is a DFA and this is an FAC. Right? Good. And then where do I move my final voice?
You need to, sorry, let me. You need to move it,
You know it's going to move by step.
yeah.
So I just need to know which note is missing from my FAC chord.
So, you need another, or you need a C.
That's right.
And it needs to move down.
That's right. Ta-da! Perfect. No chord writing errors. No chord writing errors whatsoever. Let's stay in the same key. Just use some different chords. Whose roots are a third apart still. How about 6 going to 4? Oh, let's see here. 6 in B flat. Let's voice it as follows. And I'm going to go to 4. Let's see. How do I want to create an error here? Okay, I'm telling you that there's an error in that measure. Something is not hunky-dory. Something is not quite right. You know?
All three tones.
Say again?
You don't have all three.
Okay, so what is missing in this 4 chord here? A B flat, right? I don't have all the notes of the chord here. It's an E flat, G, B flat chord, and I don't have all of them there. I've got 2 E flats and I've got 2 Gs, but I don't have a B flat. So that's not right. That's not right. So let's see if we can fix this problem. I like to sometimes write the notes down to fill out the chord so I can see what should be common and what isn't. What are the 2 shared tones between a G minor triad and E flat major triad?
G flat and G.
Which one?
G and B flat.
That's right, G and B flat. Okay. So what does the one guideline say to do?
Keep those the same.
Find those 2 pitches and keep them stationary. There's one, that's a G. Here's a B flat. And then where's the final voice, the alto D, where is that going to go? To fill out what I need doubled in my 4 chord.
So move up.
Gonna move up my step, that's right. And there you go. Okay. I want to show you one thing in the book on page 87. I don't feel the need to take too much time. have some nice short examples in your textbook on page 87. Do you see how the first measure there, they've given you the bass and the soprano, or the outer voices, and I have filled in the inner voices, the alto and the tenor. But do you see how, take a look at the intervals between the roots, or the root relationship in all these. You see how G down to E flat, that's the root relationship of a third. And then E flat down to C, the roots are a third apart again. So when I went from the first chord to the second chord, I used this one guideline right here. And when I went from the second chord to the third chord, I used this one guideline right here. Because the roots are a third apart. Bless you. Well, what is the root distance between the third chord and the last chord, C to F? How far are the roots apart there?
4.
A fourth, right? So am I going to use the one guideline that we just learned today for that? No, I'm going to use one of the 3 guidelines that we learned last class. So on the next homework assignment, you might have a short example, in fact you probably will have a short example, where you have to look to see how far the roots are apart to tell which guideline to use. The last 2 chords, the roots are a fourth apart, so I have to use guideline 1, 2, or 3, and it looks like I use guideline 1, and I put 1 in the blank. And I'm still going to continue to ask you, when the roots are a fourth apart, which guideline did you use to get from the first chord to the next chord correctly? Did you use guideline 1, 2, or 3? I won't ask you for the guideline you used when the roots are a third apart, because there's only one. That make sense? Okay. So you got to use like a little combination. Just make sure you know how far the roots are apart, and then you know which guideline to use to get from the first chord to the second chord. And when you do that, it should all work out with no errors. And it should be pretty smooth too. Notice that the alto in this case is moving completely by step. In fact, it's on the same note most of the time. And then in here, the tenor is moving by step as well. You'll find out, unfortunately, I'm sorry, but sometimes the altos and the tenors have a line where they just sing the same note over and over again for a little while. That's designed that way. Okay. Doesn't mean they're not so important. All the voices are very important to get all the sounds, to get all the notes, to get all the doubling, everything correct. But it's designed that way so it's singable. Okay? Anyways, hopefully that'll at least get you kind of in the right mindset to get going on the next homework assignment. Since we are out of time, let me give you that right now. All it is another handout, just one side of a piece of paper. There are errors given to you in 3 examples up here. I want you to find or mark the error and label the error and then part rate it correctly down below. And then here's that shorter example that has both root motion of 5th, 4th, and 3rd. Okay? I think as long as you read the instructions, you should be able to figure it out. So this is for, what is it, Wednesday. Go back.